Everyone, what's going on? First video of the day. This video is Ex-Racists of Reddit. What made you change your mind? Posted by Quanris. First one, education. I grew up in the deep south. 20 years of my life was spent on the same exact street that my family has lived on for over 100 years. I went to public school, K through 12, so I basically grew up with the same people around aside from the occasional new student who made the questionable decision to move there. When we all graduated, we all went to the same exact community college. I just got tired of it. I made the decision to move north to go to college. One of the first courses I took was sociology class about our country's perspectives on different races. It instantly opened my eyes about how racist I truly was. I had been raised in it, genuinely brainwashed into the ignorant thinking that rule racist attitudes. I had never even stopped to ask myself if I were racist until that class. It was then that I came to the hard conclusion that I was racist, homophobic, and sexist. I'm female, and I had some harsh attitudes towards how a female should behave, dress, etc. I'm ashamed of the things I used to think and the disdain I used to hold toward other people. But admitting to being wrong is the first step towards progression. I'm very glad that I took that class and that I realized my harmful behaviors. It's something I think back to constantly and consider it as a turning point in my life. I went away to college. I was a kid in a racist family. N-bombs were thrown around the dinner table regularly. I had really only met a few African Americans in my whole life. I was also the first in my family to go to college, other than my brother, to seminary for the cult my family is in, which I don't count. My friend Richard, redacted, was my first black friend. I think he only liked me at first because he had a crush on my friend Amy, and she would always be at my parties. But we ended up being friends for 4 years. I'm naturally sort of empathetic, and I'm good at putting myself in others' shoes. It just sort of dawned on me very early on that I wouldn't speak or act that way if he was around, so I just decided I should never act that way. It took me a little while to forgive myself for being garbage, but I was a kid and literally didn't know any better. Oh yeah, and I fired my shitty family. My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being racist is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything though, so at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first non-100% white grandkid and discovered she still loved him. She made an astounding late-life progress accepting that darker skin-toned people were not only people, but family, friends, and welcome in her house. I never made the choice, really, to be racist, but I grew up in South Mississippi, and my family wasn't overtly racist, but they were the kind to say racist things behind closed doors and didn't allow us to watch TV shows such as The Cosby Show, A Fresh Prince, and definitely no rap music in the house. I absolutely fell in love with a lot of black artists in the early 90s. I loved the hip-hop scene at the time, and holy shit, Fresh Prince was the best sitcom on television. I played football with 80% black guys and worked at Popeye's Chicken, with over half the staff being black. I guess you could say my own real-world exposure, despite their attempt to shelter me, changed me. I cringed at some of the vernacular I used in my early youth, as the N-word was the same as black in my house. I literally was not raised to know that was a bad word. I'm glad that from the age of maybe 12 on, I learned to love all people on my own. My whole family is quite racist. When I was little, I was trying to wrap my head around the rules of the world, so I thought it was as simple as different teams. Blacks versus whites was just like the Red Sox versus the Tigers. Then my grandmother starts going on about how horrible Polish people are, and how I'm never to talk to them. So I'm psyched. Screw those Polish people, whatever color they are, we're mortal enemies. Then she points out our Polish neighbor to me, but she's white. I point out to my grandmother, and she's white, so we're on the same team. My grandmother says no, that she's mixed breed. I point out that my great-granddad was a Shoshone Indian, and that I'm a mixed breed. She says that doesn't count. That's when I realized she was just making up the rules, and I wasn't going to play games with someone who couldn't stick to the rules. I wasn't an actual racist per se, but I definitely had a stereotypical idea how a group of people is because of the action of the few or because of what I'd seen on the media. What made me change? Well, I saw a video of a writer named Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She spoke about the dangers of the single story, and that video changed my life and it opened my eyes. Check it out on YouTube and write Chimamanda Ngozi, Dangers of a Single Story. I had a super racist grandpa and uncle, both pieces of shit supported by my grandma. I would frequently stay with them while both my parents worked on Saturdays. I would pretend around them when I was younger because I wanted to be like them. I don't remember this story, but my mom will tell it so proudly if the subject of racism comes up. She was very different from her dad/brother. I was maybe 6 or 7 when one day I was crying when my mom picked me up, and the whole way home I just sobbed like my heart was broken. I wouldn't tell her what was wrong, but I cried quietly the whole way home and went right into my bed and lay down crying. My dad and her came in and asked me what was wrong. I still didn't want to tell them, and my dad got a little gruff with me. Boy, you tell me what's wrong right now. If somebody hurt you or told you not to tell me, and I guess I started crying loudly for the first time and blurted out. Grandpa and Uncle Chuck said I can't be friends with Malcolm anymore because he's a dirty N-word. My uncle made me call him and say that to him. My mom immediately flew into a rage. She went down there and, from what I was told, beat the living shit out of her brother, told her dad that I was not coming over anymore, and that he was no longer invited to any family events. She then drove to my friend's house with blood from my uncle's nose still on her shirt, apologized profusely for what had happened, and told them the story and that I had been crying the whole time because my uncle made me do that. We had dinner the next day, and instead of going to my grandpa's house on Saturdays, I ended up going to my friend Malcolm's house. Note, I say had because my grandpa is dead, and later in life I told my uncle, who had never changed, that he's not my uncle anymore when he called me 2-year-old half-Mexican niece. I won't say that. He now has a half-Mexican grandson, but from what I hear, he hasn't really changed. The answers to frequent questions. 1. Malcolm and I grew apart when my family moved away. We would eventually move back, but his family had moved by then. 2. I'm not going to type out the full word, but if you Google Mexican slurs, you can find it yourself. 3. My mother says she'll adopt all of you, no smoking in the house, and don't drink the last Mountain Dew. 4. My grandfather actually did put in an attempt to try after that day. The relationship was eventually repaired before he died in 1999. He actually married a former nun, and she shaped him up before he died. Straight up smacked his knuckles with a ruler once. 5. Uncle Shithead is still a shithead. My uncle used to be the most racist person I knew, and it drove me crazy. But he is an old white man and set in his ways. It is what he would say when confronted. It all changed the day his great-granddaughter was born. His granddaughter had married a black man, and he was unaccepting until that baby was born. She had him wrapped around her pinky finger from her first breath. Since then, there are several mixed children in the family. It's awesome to see the difference in his behavior. He genuinely loves them all and accepts the racially different spouses of his grandchildren and their children. If he hears anyone being racist, he shuts it down. Not myself, but many former racist, or at least now less racist, friends of mine were able to have their minds change just by simple exposure, especially to non-whites that didn't fit the stereotype. At first, it starts that they are just one of the good ones, but after a while, when they meet enough good ones, they start to realize that the good outnumber the bad, and the racial worldview starts to crack. Doesn't work on all of them, though. Some are racist due to education and esteem issues, but many are racist simply from the lack of exposure to other races, only having what the media/environment they live in tell them what to fill in that gap. A guy I worked with said he was a neo-Nazi as a teenager and ended up in prison somehow. He hated Jews for some reason and blacks. He is never clear on why, just that he had so much hatred in his heart and that it was his outlet. He was in prison for many years. I think he almost killed somebody by beating them up. So, many years later, and in prison, there was a mentor-type staff there, and this one lady was so helpful to him, and she cared about him so much that it really started to get into his head, the idea of being a positive person. Then, he learned that she was Jewish, and he said he couldn't believe she was so kind and caring despite the fact he was claimed he was acclaimed neo-Nazi. From that day, he swore to be a better person. He learned his lesson. He's a pretty great guy these days, doing his family thing and making sure his sons grow up with lots of love and all that he didn't have. Really remarkable, great guy. That's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys liked it. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Stick around for the next video.